This time on Poll Hub, we have been busy. We have numbers from our brand new NPR Marist poll that reveal that Joe Biden has plenty to be happy about and a very big warning sign he ought to be looking at. And our Marist America Now index is out. How do Americans feel about the economy, their health, their communities, and some other things? The overall number hasn't changed, but there's plenty to talk about when we pull back the covers. Ooh, such a tease. So let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Jay DeDapper, Director of Innovation here at the Marist Poll.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho, Director of the Marist Poll.
And I'm Lee Miringoff, Director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion.
6.2. What does that mean to you?
The same thing it meant a month ago.
And the month before. Our America Now index, we break it into 4 categories, but we give a top line number, the big number, the index of how America is feeling about ourselves in a bunch of different ways, and we kind of put it all together in one. And 6.2 has been where we have sat now for 3 months. Not great, not terrible, kind of the Goldilocks moment. It's just right, maybe. maybe we could get better. But there are some things inside the numbers, I think, that are interesting. But let's start with that 6.2. What does it say that we haven't moved any since January? Because a lot of things have changed since January.
Yeah, that's really true, Jay. And, to add to this consistency, at the end of November, the index was at 6.3. So just one notch higher, and you're right, it has been a steady state. I mean, part of that I think has been also a somewhat of a consistency of, what Americans are going through in terms of the pandemic. Over these several months, we've had a couple of surges, after each of the holidays throughout the country. And I think in a number of places, there has been some, difficulties in opening up, and certainly a concern about opening up the economy to the full extent and what the implications of that would be. But as you mentioned, below that very consistent number that we have been seeing for the last several months, there's a glimmer of hope, and particularly when we look at the economy. We see that the economic number is 5.2, which puts it practically smack in the middle. But what we see are some signs of optimism about the jobs market, about the economy as a whole, and families and how they feel about their future financial picture. So we are starting to see some movement there, and I think that certainly matches up with what is happening in a number of places around the country. What I think everyone is somewhat cautious about is whether that is going to be sustained.
Yeah, and answering your initial question, Jay, I think it's important. I mean, when you're talking about an index and you're talking about a national outlook index, the outlook is not going to bounce along like any single poll might have. But the ingredients of the whole thing create a general predisposition, and that is one of caution here. How could we be anything other than cautious coming through the pandemic and the related economic hardship that has had? But as Barb said, I mean, people, in part because of the opening up, in part because of the Rescue Act, I think we're seeing people thinking that this might be a better time financially in the next few months for their families. And the risk to health is right now we're seeing people at the least risky feeling. Their little risk is at its highest point in terms of health. So we're seeing, again, the realities of what's going on showing up in some of these numbers. But when you talk about way down at the bottom of our chart here, you feel you live in a society that's fair and just. Well, that may also be reflecting what's going on. We have trials going on. There's racial concerns and a lot of other voting issues that are being debated about. And that is the lowest single factor of all 16 that we measure on a given index. So yes, I think it does respond to the current feelings and changes that are going on in our society. But as an outlook, your outlook doesn't change dramatically unless events are so cataclysmic that, if we were doing this maybe last year, we would have seen big changes in the economy and healthcare.
I think one of the big stories I see in the economic index is actually, if we do go back to last year, and we started this in May of 2020 and then fully rolled it out in June of 2020. So we weren't doing it, as you point out, Lee, when things fell off a cliff, and there we would have seen a big change. But what strikes me is that when we look at June and July on the economy, and I want to stop on the economy here because that's always been the roughest part of this in this last year. People have felt kind of least positive about the economy. And it was back at 5.2 in June and then 5.0 in July. But then in September and October, it had come up a lot. And I think a lot of that had to do with the pandemic. By the time you get to September and when we're polling in October, the holidays hadn't come. We'd gotten through the second wave. Things seemed to be taking a turn for the better in terms of the coronavirus. And then things fell back down. So the economic index went from 5.5 to 5.1 in November to 4.9 in January. And I think that tells the story. That roller coaster, and it is more of a roller coaster than we've seen in almost any other segment, tells that story of the recurring waves of the pandemic and what that has caused people to think about in terms of the economy. The final thing about the economy that strikes me is that are jobs easy to find right now is a question that has been, again, up and down just like that. But we're at 4.9. That is the highest it has been. It's the highest it's been since we've been asking this and we asked that question in May of 2020. And that seems to align very well with what we're seeing from the data coming out of the jobs, picture from the Department of Labor. So I think we're picking up something that is very, very real out there. But I think there's a really interesting story in what we've been through in the last year.
Well, when it comes to the index, what I do find interesting is actually the lack of change from one presidential administration to the next. Uh, what can we take away from that?
If you look at some of the right direction, wrong direction polling questions, people who felt under the Trump years were heading in the right direction now think this may not be the same with the Biden years and vice versa. So I think that sort of, the changing administration
just balances out because
we're such a 50-50 country that I think it's, kind of like a musical chairs. You get up, someone else sits down, and we move on from there. It would be interesting to see. Let's fast forward this a year from now. And if we have the pandemic finally in our rearview mirror and the economy is humming along, what are these numbers going to show? They're going to show a lot better today across the board. And the partisan splits may not be as reflected now as they are.
Right, but the partisan split, this is what's so interesting. The partisan split on the economic index, there virtually isn't one. Democrats are 5.2, Republicans are 5.3, independents are 5.3. That is not going to be the story in our next segment, 10 seconds from now, when we talk about our poll, right? I mean, so just put that in your head as we transition here. The Democrats, Republicans, and independents are all at the same spot in our economic index. There is essentially no partisan divide. Segue to the next one.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Jay, that was so well done. Have you ever had any experience in this kind of multimedia?
I was a DJ in high school. I could mix those records together. Yeah.
I heard that you did some weather at one
point
too.
Yes. That's why he's so good working with the cloud.
Oh,
that
gosh.
was brutal.
Oh, dad puns. Yuck.
like a dagger. All right, Barb.
Well, this week we were a little bit more busy. We actually released another poll with our partners, National Public Radio, NPR, and they were new numbers on President Biden's job approval rating, as well as we're continuing to track Americans' willingness to take the COVID 19 vaccine. But as you point out, Jay, this consensus that we're seeing on the index for the economy is nothing like what we're seeing in terms of the results on this poll when it comes to the president, where the the um, the partisan divide is very real and very much in place. So, guys, tell me what were your takeaways from this poll.
Let's do.
Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Let me do numbers real quick. Yeah, Lee. Let me just do a
Yep.
couple numbers, and then you can jump in. 52% of Americans approve of the job that he's doing in office. That's up from 49 in our last poll. Not much change there. Above 50. And then we asked about three issues, and I think important to look at, right? The economy, 51% approve of his handling of the economy. There is a part of the split I'm sure we'll talk about. Coronavirus, 65% approve of his handling of the coronavirus. And then immigration, 34% approve of his handling of immigration. So those are some numbers. Lee, have at it.
Well, just from a polling standpoint, it sure suggests that people are listening to us when we're asking them questions, because they're providing very different answers. And it's not Joe Biden, he's great, or Joe Biden, he's awful. No, it depends on what we're talking about.
That's real. That's really a pollster.
Well, I thought, that's a little bit about what Poll Hub is.
That's
and
what
I
our podcast
that
is. So, yeah.
I would comment, well, there's a lot to talk about there. We know that as the economy goes up, Biden's numbers are going to go up. Okay, and we know that that is, sort of his meal ticket. It is the ticket for Democrats in the midterm elections and probably in 2024 as well, if we get the coronavirus in our rearview mirror. What I found really interesting in these numbers is that when you talk about people who've had the virus, who've had the vaccine or are willing to have the vaccine, that number has grown steadily, which is a good thing. 62 to 67, and now 70% are telling us they either have had the vaccine or will. So I think that's like, as the president would say, a big deal, because the public health people say the way out of this ultimately is through herd immunity, and we have to have more people than now, and even the 70% probably, to get to that point. But it's inching upwards. And we see it also among Donald Trump backers, who in our previous poll just a few weeks ago, 47% of Trump backers said they would not take the vaccine. That number has declined to 40%. And I think that's important, because I think you're seeing a growing acceptance, maybe slowly, maybe begrudgingly, of the fact that maybe this vaccine is something that more people should be taking. So those are some of my takeaways.
You had mentioned that Biden's secret to success, and certainly in 2022, and if we even look farther ahead, I can't even believe we're saying the words 2024 when we've just come through a presidential election season. Are really hinge on the economy, which isn't unusual, but there is a caveat there, isn't there? I mean, if this pandemic is, if he's not successful in reining in this pandemic, I mean, obviously the economy will struggle, but isn't this really why he was elected?
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw that all through the fall in the polling numbers, and then all you got to do is look at his final polling numbers on issues, and the amount that he won by, which was a big number as a national level, but in many states by a small number. But it was all about the coronavirus. That's what he ran on. That's all he's focused on. He's been laser focused on that, and by kind of extension, the economy. So I agree with you. When you look at his approval numbers and you look at 65% approval on coronavirus, that is as I think as good a number as the president in this partisan atmosphere could get for a big issue. It's huge. 31% of Republicans, 1 in 3 Republicans, approve of the job he's doing on the coronavirus. So that then translates, I think, to the economy, where just 13% of Republicans, for instance, approve of the job he's doing in the economy. But 13% of Republicans approving of a Democratic president in this last decade is like, it's amazing. I mean, that's
a big deal.
That's a big deal. But that brings us, and I don't want to miss this, immigration. there is an argument going on in the partisan media about whether it's a crisis or not. That word has been used. We've used it on this show, and it's become a loaded word. It's not a crisis. It is a crisis. It's become a partisan issue. Americans clearly believe if it's not a crisis, it's a pretty big darn deal. And when 34%, just 34% approve of the job he's doing, and only 66% of Democrats approve, I think this is a giant red flag for him. And, clearly his political team does too. He's put the vice president on it and said, Kamala, go fix this. So I think they recognize that. But this seems to be as big a story to me as his positive numbers on the coronavirus.
Well, what I found interesting, because we had asked a similar question during actually at the end of Trump's first year in office, and what struck me in comparing these numbers is that they were very similar. Biden has a 34% approval rating when it comes to immigration policy, and Trump had a 38%. Both significantly upside down, with the majority of Americans feeling that they weren't up to the task. So, in our partisan, I mean, we can't account for that similarity just in terms of partisanship. Is this just too complex an issue to even be clearly a partisan divide?
Yeah, I think it speaks to that, and I think it also speaks to the fact that presidents don't necessarily control their agendas. And Jay, you were talking about him being laser focused on the pandemic and therefore the economy. Well, immigration has not been his laser focus so far, and yet the problem is a tough one. It lacks an easy solution. Not that the others have easy solutions. But I think it does speak to, many presidents have gone down this road and have not gotten where they wanted to be on this issue. And we're still sort of back to where we've been on a lot of this, except border concerns and humanity concerns.
Yeah, I think the big distinction here between Trump and him, though, is that in Trump's case at 38%, his supporters thought he was doing a great job. But 38% is what his supporters are. That was, his approval rating was in the low 40s. I think Joe Biden has a problem in that the Democratic Party, there's plenty of people in the Democratic Party who don't think he's doing a good job from kind of the other angle. So he's kind of getting it from both sides. I don't think Donald Trump was getting it from both sides. He was getting it all from one side. And I think that squeeze makes this a greater challenge for Joe Biden to handle than for Donald Trump. And as we've all pointed out, and if there's an intractable problem in American politics, and there's only one, I'm voting for this one.
And it doesn't go away anytime fast. And to get a bipartisan support, maybe they'll get a group together, but it's going to take pulling a rabbit out of the hat to get there, I suspect. Speaking of rabbits, this weekend is Easter. How's that? Thank you very much. And that's no better way than to introduce the fun fact for this week, and it comes back from. Again, from the Roper Center, helping us out with a poll that was conducted in April 2017 by CBS News and SSRS. And the question was people's favorite Easter candy. Now, I don't know what you guys think about this. I will say that for Passover, I love these chocolate graham crackers with dark chocolate, delicious. Get them down from Russ and Daughters in Manhattan. You can get them up here. This is not an endorsement, but if they're listening, send another box. I'll be more than happy to accommodate. But what do you guys think?
Well, maybe fruit flavored jelly beans.
Okay, 26%. You're in second place for that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Jay, what?
I remember as a kid, I mean, Easter was not super religious for our family. It was, about hunting for jelly beans in the lawn or in the house, in the nooks and crannies. And then the chocolate bunny. I loved the big chocolate bunny you broke open and it turned into pieces of chocolate. So that's number 3. And this was not arranged this way, that we picked 1, 2, and 3. Well, you didn't pick 1, Lee. You picked Russ and Daughters. So 24% say the chocolate bunnies.
Yeah, so just to make sure everybody's on top of this, because these are critical issues of our time for sure. 29% of Americans say the chocolate eggs 26% go with the jelly beans, 24% go with the chocolate bunnies, 6% say peeps. I have no idea what a peep is.
They're
I've been
disgusting.
told.
Oh yeah, they were little marshmallow chickens. I think you like.
And for I like most of this, is there don't we usually have a category for all of the above when it comes to the whole?
Well, certainly this would definitely warrant.
Yeah, and I'm there with this one, but thank you for Roper and CBS for whetting our appetite for the holiday season.
And happy Easter.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Poll Hub. Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in beautiful Poughkeepsie, New York. I'm Mary Griffith and Poll Hub's executive producer. Thanks so much for joining us today. Rounding out our production team are Casey Schaff, our production supervisor, Amelia Morell, our production assistant, and Marcello Bettman, our trusted editor. Of course, thanks to the Roper Center Archive at Cornell University. They provide us with the ability to look back at survey questions and results over the decades. And if you have questions or comments, reach out to us on social media. We're at Marist Poll on Twitter and Marist Poll on Facebook and Instagram. Finally, if you like what you hear on Poll Hub, please consider leaving us a review on your podcasting app of choice. Positive reviews help others find us. And while you're at it, why not go ahead and subscribe? Again, thanks for being here. We'll catch you next week.